Hey everyone, welcome to the January edition of Community Call from ToolJet. In today's call, we'll be building a multilingual ToolJet application with two different methods. So without any further ado, let's jump on to the agenda of the call. So I will be starting with a quick overview of the application and its feature. Then I'll be showing you a step-by-step guide of how we have stored the data for different languages and also for different labels. And then we'll be integrating the translation queries so that we can support multiple languages in our ToolJet application. And lastly, we'll be opening the floor for questions and answer. Now let me quickly show you the multilingual application that we are going to build. So this is the multilingual employee directory application that we are going to build in today's call. Here you can see there is a drop down of language on right hand side. So if you click on this, you can see we have French and Spanish language over here. If you click on French, you can see that all the labels over here along with the data inside of the table has been converted into French language. Even the modal is in the French language. And now if you change this to Spanish, you can see that the entire application has been converted into Spanish language. Before we move to building the application, let me show you how we are storing the labels data and the data inside of the table. We are using Supabase to store the data, and this is the label translations data. You can see that we have three languages, English, French and Spanish, and we are storing the data in JSON format. So if I show you the JSON, these are all the labels and these are the values which are in different languages. So right now this is in English language. If I go to the French one, you can see the data here is in French language, and last is the Spanish. Also, we are storing the employees data in different languages. I'll show you. This is the English language data. The data is similar in all these tables. It's just the language is different. These are for Spanish and this is for French language. Now let's start converting this employee directory application into a multilingual application. As I showed in the demo, we need a drop down of languages so that we can switch across different languages. So let's add a drop down first, like this. Let's design this drop down component. Let's remove the label. Color will be adding the similar color which we have in background here. Okay, background color will be this. Okay, um border color also let's keep the same. Okay, let's take the accent color and also add it to text. We are adding an icon over here, so we'll be adding a world icon which can represent the language. Yeah, this looks good. um let's change the color of the icon as well. All right, let's keep it a little smaller and let's change the position to this. Okay, cool. Let's now add options in the drop down. We have to go to properties and here it will be English, value will be English. Okay, if you see, yeah, similarly it will be French, French. Here it will be Spanish and Spanish in value. Cool. All right, so our drop down is ready. We can keep English as our default. All right, now every time we change the drop down, we should be able to change the labels over here into the language selected inside of the drop down component. And to do that, let's get the label translation data via query. So let's add a Supabase query. Operation will be get rows. Name is label translations. If I run this, Here we're getting the data, right? Now we have to write a transformation because we do not want all the data. We want the language specific data over here. So we can go to transformation and here we'll write a transformation. Since the data is in first index, we'll do this, and here we can add the language whichever we are selecting from the drop down component. So we can write components drop down one value. So if you run this over here, you can see we are getting the labels in English language. If I change this to French, and now if I run the query, you can see we are getting the French language data now. Let's first change the name of the query to labels. Now let's start adding all of these label values to the actual labels inside of the application. So here we can add queries, labels, data, and heading. Okay, so we're getting the heading. Here we can have the container heading, container heading. This is for name, then email, then we have phone, then we have designation, let's keep it down, then this department, then here we have the save button, save, then for delete. Okay, we can also change the headers of the table component. So to do that, we can go to the columns and write name over here. For name, for email we can write email, for phone we can write uh, phone, and for designation we can write designation, for department we can write department. Okay, cool. So we are having French language and all our headings are in French language now. We are also left with the modal component, so let's do that. We'll change the button label first. It will be add employee. Okay, now here modal title is also add employee, then name, then email, then designation, phone number, then department. Last is the add button label. It will be add. All right. So we are pretty much done with converting all the labels over here. Now let's add an event handler on the drop down. So every time we change the language, we can get the updated data. So let's add a on select event. It should run a query, and query is labels. Now if I change this to English, you can see that we are getting the labels in English. If you change it to Spanish, the labels are converted to Spanish language. We also have data for different languages in our database, so we can also update the data inside of the table component according to the language selected in the dropdown. So let's create the queries for the same. So let's create first query, that is get employees fr for French. Operation will be get rows, table will be employee fr, and if I run this, we're getting the data. Let's duplicate the fr query and change it to es for Spanish. So we'll change this to es. Run the query, we're getting the Spanish data. Now, in order to load different data as per what we select on the drop-down component, we have to create a run.js query over here so that we can differentiate between which query to run based on the selection in the drop-down component. For that, let's add a run.js query, and this will be get translated data. So first we'll get the value from drop-down component, that is the language. This will be components drop-down value. Okay. Now if language is English, then we'll just run the Supabase query for English language, that is queries get employees English, run. Okay, and then we store the value in the value variable, value queries get employees en and get data. Okay, and then we'll just return the value. Okay, we have to do the same for French and Spanish. This will be French, this will be fr. Okay, then this will be es, and this will be Spanish. Okay, let's run this on page load, and now if you run the query, since we are in Spanish language, we should get the Spanish data. Okay, we're getting the Spanish data over here. Let's now close the query builder and connect queries get translated data dot data. Okay, cool. So now the data we have is Spanish. We also want to add a loader to the table component, so we'll go here and we'll change this to get translated data is loading. We also want to add one more event handler to the dropdown, because when we change the language, we want to show the updated data over here. So we'll add our run query, and query is the translated data. Now let's change this to English. As you can see over here, we're getting the data in English language. So everything including the labels and the data is been converted into different languages as per whatever we are choosing in the drop-down component. So this was the first method of converting your applications into multilingual applications. There is one more approach that you can take, that is using AI. So let's learn about that now. In this method, we'll be using OpenAI APIs to convert our labels into different languages. We'll be passing a JSON of labels and the language in which we want to convert the labels. So let's create a JSON of labels in a JavaScript query. This will be labels, and here we'll just return the labels. If you run this, here are the labels. Now let's create a REST API which we'll be using to make OpenAI API calls. So this will be get translated labels. This will be a post query. Here is the completion endpoint, and we'll be adding two headers over here. First will be the content type, which is application JSON, and another is authorization. And here we have to pass the API key. I already have stored it in my global constants, so I can use it like this: constants OpenAI. Okay. Now in body, we have to pass a raw JSON where we are giving a prompt to OpenAI to take the language from a drop-down component and JSON from the labels, and then return us the converted language JSON. So now let's add data in the body. As you can see over here, I've written the prompt that you are a language translator assistant, and here I'm just passing the value of the drop down. As you can see in English, it should show us English. As soon as I change this to French, this should show us French over here. For user role, we are getting the data from the labels query, and then we are stringifying it, and then we are replacing all the double quotes to single quotes, as you can see over here. Else OpenAI will throw an error while you run the query. Okay. Now we are on French language. Let's try to run this. We got some response. If you see, we got the response in French language successfully. Now let's connect the response that we got to the label components. So this will be queries get translated labels dot data, then it will be choices message content, and here we'll replace all the single quotes with double quotes, and lastly we have to parse this JSON, and then we will take our first employee directory. Okay, if you do this, we are getting the data over here. Cool. Now let's do this for all the labels which are there in the application. Okay, let's start with employee details. Here it will be employee details, then here it will be name, then here it will be email, then phone, then designation, then it will be a department. For save button it will be save, for delete button it will be delete, for add employees, let's make this first add employee. Okay, this will be similar, so for this button also I'll add employee. Okay, here again we have to add for each of these labels it will be name, email, designation, then phone number, and last is department. We do not have cancel button. For add button it will be add. Cool. So we're done with this. Last is we can also change the table labels over here. We can do this in the last method that I show. There also we could have done, but here I'll just show you how you can change the headers also for the label table component. So we'll just change the column name, and here it will be name, then second is email. Key should be similar to what you have in column right now, so make sure you do that first. Then phone number, designation, then last is department. Cool. Now let's add an event to the drop down so that every time you change the drop down, it will run the OpenAI query. We'll be adding an event handler over here. It should run a query and queries get translated labels. Okay. Now when you go to Spanish, you can see all the data got converted into Spanish, including your buttons, modals, everything. All right. Now if you want to add a new language over here, you can just create a new option and you can add your preferred language and all the labels will be converted into that language. So yeah, these are the two methods you can use to convert your applications into multilingual ToolJet applications. Now we'll be opening the floor for questions and answer. In case if you have any questions, queries related to whatever we discussed today, or any questions in general, feel free to drop them in the chat. Thank you everyone for joining the call. See you in the next one.